this computer. Okay. So some of the other reports that libraries need to be conscious of, and we'll start with the association libraries. So there are 19 association libraries in RCLS, and those libraries are truly 501c3s, right? And as such, you're required to file a federal 990 informational return. And if you had unrelated business income tax, like NIAC has rental properties, they would have to file a 990T for taxable income. The rest of the libraries, 28 public libraries, school district, municipal, and special district libraries, in addition to filing the annual report, are required to file an annual update document with the New York State Controller's Office 60 days after year end. I'm not sure very many people get it done 60 days after year end, but if you don't do it within a year, they will call you. And my suggestion is, if you can't have accountants, have them do this, because that annual update document is a bear, and that's going to be changing platforms in the next couple of years as well. Now, libraries are exempt from filing a New York State charities filing called a CHAR 500. We're exempt from filing that charities filing because we file the annual report. However, if you pay a professional fundraiser more than $5,000, then you will be required to file this report, and the fundraiser should actually do this with you. Now, thinking about friends groups, most friends groups are small, but if they're incorporated as a non-for-profit, then the minimum they have to do is file a 990N, which is like a postcard. And I believe they can do this electronically now. And that's if they have receipts that are left at less than $50,000 a year. And I think there's 5 simple questions. And then the last thing is also sales tax, right? So if you're a friends group and you have a permanent book sale, or if you're the library and it's your permanent book sale, a permanent book sale is a trigger for collecting sales tax. You have a cafe, things like that. Even at RCLS, we file an annual sales tax return. All of our sales are to you guys, and it's all non-taxable, but we still have to file the return. And then the last thing is the tax cap filing, right? Every library that has ever gone out for a public vote at any time must file the tax cap filing. And the filing is due after your board approves the amount and before the public votes on it. If you can. Some libraries are going out for a vote before the information is available, in which case, once that information is available, the tax cap levy amount, then you would file it. Now, remember, we still recommend passing an overriding resolution, especially if you don't know what your tax cap is going to be, but there's no need to do a rescinding resolution anymore, right? That was for the tax freeze program, and that went away about 3 or 4 years ago. If you do not file your tax cap filing, you will get a call from the controller's office probably about a year after it's due. So a little bit about the annual report. There's approximately 520 questions. 83 of them are total lines. 61 questions are grayed out. RCLS gives you the answers to about 34, 35 questions. So you're now down to about 340 questions. You're practically done with the report. So out of those questions, 39 of them are going to be the same as last year. Your phone numbers, your address, the square footage of the building, and stuff like that. And actually this year, they've pre-filled that information for you. That was a recommendation that we gave. So there's about 300 questions that the libraries have to answer. And at 5 minutes a question, it should take about 24 hours and 2 bottles of wine to complete. Now, the reports are due to RCLS midnight on February 22nd. And they're going to be reviewed in the order that we receive them. So if your report comes in last, then you'll have the least amount of time to make any revisions before they go to the Division of Library Development on April 1st. Now, Martha and I, we review all the reports. Martha will do the circulations, the holdings, and the trustee questions, and I will do everything else. So if you have any questions about those sections, you can direct them to Marla or Jerry, and any other sections will be to myself. So we review all the reports. about 17,500 questions-ish in 30 days. So the reports will go to Division of Library Development on April 1st. It'll probably take them till late June to review. Now, none of the LLSA money gets distributed until all the annual reports are submitted. And then that's when the 90% gets submitted. And then the final 10% gets submitted when all of the annual reports are approved by Division of Library Development. And they actually just did that for last year's report. And just yesterday, we got the 10% of the LLSA payment. So that payment will be going out to you guys probably on Monday or so. Now, this is a little odd because this is last year's money. So make sure you keep this in mind with the annual report that it's on a cash basis. So the money you're going to receive in 2021, even though technically it's 2022, you're going to report it in 2021, right? And let's see. So the things that we use the annual report for internally, we use it to calculate the contributions for the e-content pool that everybody shares in, and which we just saw at a system services meeting. Actually, the e-content circulation has increased by 44% last year. So that's a big win. We also use statistics to calculate the answer fees, the RCLS service fee, and I do a host of other reports for libraries, like the Stony Rose Memorial Library was looking at expansion. So I did a calculation or an analysis of the square footage of libraries by population, and also going out for looking for a new director. So I gave them analysis of what every library director or manager earns as compared to the population as well, so they can see how to be competitive. So those are just some of the things we use the annual report information for. And you can always ask me, and I'll be happy to put together reports because I can do that very quickly. I'm so familiar with it if you've got projects coming up. So don't be afraid to ask. So that's my little intro. Do we have any questions in the chat room or anything before we move on? Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen so we can go to the RCLS website. Okay, so you see the RCLS website? Yes, okay. So the LibGuide is under resources, resources for directors, and report LibGuide. Right. Resources, resources for directors, and report LibGuide. And then we click on it. So here's our LibGuide, and we have the tabs across the top outlining it as you go through the report. So in the home page, we just have, a link if you wanted to register. If you get really bored, you can play darts. And then we have some information about the annual report down here. Just a little background information. The software was unlocked January 26th. Here's a link if you want to connect to it. So if you click on this, that will bring you to the login page of the annual report. Does everybody see the login page?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So again, just reminding you the due date, February 22nd. Something to consider, right? We all know that the pandemic has significantly impacted our report, specifically circulation transactions, and it's going to be a lot of your programming, right? And so you're going to have numbers will be a lot lower. We do not want thousands of notes in people's reports saying due to COVID. They've eliminated a lot of these edit checks. In fact, we don't want you to put in a note unless the edit check asks you for it. And specifically, when we come to the programming, I would like to suggest, rather than take we can't do this because of COVID, we couldn't do that, our numbers decreased to COVID, instead sell your success stories, right? Turn it. We did this, and this is how we did it. So when we come to programmings and that, I would say that's how you should approach it if you can. Outline our major changes. These are links. When I click on the link, it creates a PDF and it doesn't show on the screen. So I'm not going to show it really. Board approvals, right? I expect maybe 1 or 2 boards to approve it in February. I expect most of your boards to approve it after it's been submitted in March at your March board meeting. And that's where they're going to catch that their phone number is off or their email address has got a wrong letter in it. So, so make sure you communicate those things to me when they come up. On the right-hand side, just some more information. This is really information pre-annual report, how to prepare for it. One of the things you always want to do is in the report is, if you don't have it, either print a copy of last year's report or make sure we use the show last year's, because some of the information changed and you want to see what was actually submitted and approved. Okay. So let's get started. I'm just going to jump to the bottom real quick. We have a couple links down here. And again, if you click on this, it brings up a PDF of the DLD's outline of major changes. We've taken those outlines and we've incorporated it into our LibGuide. In fact, most of the stuff in blue is our changes that we want to highlight. Here's, if you click on this link right here, actually there was, oh no, there we go. Nope. So if you click on this, this is actually the instructions in the PDF format. And down here is the annual report, a blank one, if you want to print that. So what's some information? I'm going to go ahead and log in real quick so I can bounce back and forth. So this is the back end. This is what we work with. And so this is where we see everybody's report. So this is where I can see who's logged in and started. And when you hit the submit button, it'll show the date over here. So I just, we format that in the date submitted order, and that's how we review it. So I'm just going to jump into Sloatsburg because we were working on that the other day. So always make sure you show last year's answers, and that'll show last year's answers here, right? That's a big key in helping to see if you're on target for something. Another recommendation from DLD is please don't use all caps in the notes and things. They prefer you don't. We've also mentioned that because of the pandemic, there will be disabling of federal and some other edit checks. So this is, I don't want you to include a note that says, due to COVID, unless there's an edit check and you have to put something in. Leave nothing blank. If it's asked for letters, put NA. If it's asking for a number, put 0 in. We suggest you tab through the report as you do it. If you tab through it, the lines will calculate, the total lines will calculate, and it also will move you correctly to the next field. And then everybody knows how to use flags, right? You click on the flag and that will identify a question you have to come back to because you don't know the answer and you want to keep moving forward. You can do a report that shows me everything that's flagged. But when you're done, make sure there are no flags left. That's just a tool for you guys to go back. And also keep in mind that throughout the report, there are different reporting timeframes. And for example, question 1.3 asks for the current director as of today. Section 2, the library collections, asks as per your fiscal year. And then other questions ask things as of the calendar year. And then of course, trustees, it's as of February 1st. So there's different time frames. It's not all just one time frame. And make sure when you log out and then you don't click the X at the top. And another thing is make sure there's only one person in your report at a time. There were some problems in other systems when they had 3 people working in a report at the same time. They were overwriting each other's stuff. Okay, and then again, a click here. Questions so far? This is all pretty familiar, right? We've done this. I'm going to do it again. So now we'll go to the general section, which is section 1. So a lot of this stuff has been pre-filled. Again, this was a suggestion. So a lot of these things are already pre-filled for you guys, NAs. And so you just want to confirm that it's correct. Things that it won't pre-fill, like I don't think it pre-fills the name, right? So here's a little trick, right? Highlight, right-click, copy, right-click, paste, right? So if you're showing last year's answers, you can copy last year's answers. And guess what? There's a note here. Previous year, you can, if there was a note in the previous year, especially in the financial sections, a lot of your notes are the same, using the same vendors. So you maybe just change dollar amounts. You can copy the previous year's notes into this year and then just make some changes. That's another little time saver. So we want to talk about library budget votes. Everybody's been doing a really good job at this, and it's pretty simple. The question is, where are we? This is another little thing of the software. On the first page, whenever you go from page to page, always save. I'm not going to because it's already been and I haven't changed anything. But when you hit next on this first page, it doesn't go to the next page. You have to hit it again. Only the first page. I don't know why. It's not you, it's the software. So then it goes. So these questions, you know, the same every year. And the question is, did you have a vote this year? If so, answer 1.46. If you didn't have a vote this year, answer, what was your last vote? Right? So that's pretty straightforward. General votes. And here's the other thing. I can't get to that tab. This thing is in the way. There we go. So this is where unusual circumstances. DLD has requested you do not put COVID in here, right? Everybody's COVID, so we know that. Again, you're getting the point. We don't want your whole report littered with COVID. However, they do say, so do not include COVID as an unusual circumstance unless it created a further unusual circumstances. Let's say the director got ill for 6 months and wasn't there, or another staff member who does all your programming wasn't available to do programming. Now that you might want to talk about because it had a further effect. Or maybe because of COVID, you did a huge weeding project because you had the building empty. You know, that you might want to put in there. Let's see. I think that's it, unless there's any other questions. Right? These were the easy parts, hopefully. Most of it's pre-filled. And when we ask for that tax levy info that you're now sending to Martha, so that's one of the things we do is we check that against your annual report. So that's one of the things we do with that as well. If there's no questions, I think we can hand this over to Jerry and he can move on. I'm looking at a chat, and it's a question from Rosemary Cooper. She was asking, so you had a a board election for trustees, but not a budget election. How do you report? So that question in section 1 is asking only about your budget. So you would only report about your budget, and then your trustees will get reported in the trustee sections via their terms changing.
Okay, can everyone see that I have the LibGuide up on my screen now? Yes? And I'm on the next tab, 2 and 4, library collections and library transactions, which are the sections that require the reports that we have generated out of Symphony and Overdrive and the database vendors. Those reports, I noticed that was a question in the chat, are found on this tab down at the bottom. And Martha has compiled them as one PDF that contains all the reports that we would normally send out in the packet. So they are all there. That's where you find those reports. These sections, collections and transactions, are pretty much identical to what they have been in past years. There are a couple of wrinkles. They have taken out one question about your library magazine subscriptions, the number of subscriptions, which was a number that we could not provide to you anyway, because it's something, it's a count of subscriptions, it's not a count of barcoded copies. So that 2.26 has now been taken out entirely. So it's actually one less task that you have to do, is go through and look to see what your subscriptions were. 2.8, the total uncatalogued books. Just keep in mind, this is everything without barcodes that you consider part of your collection. Now, the questions about the electronic books, 213, downloadable audio units, downloadable video units, we give you one figure, and to that figure you have to add in your Overdrive Advantage numbers, which we can't provide to you because we can't see them. You can only see them in your Overdrive Marketplace account. Let me see if I can switch over. All right, we're now looking at an Overdrive Marketplace account. I cannot even tell you the login password for your Overdrive Marketplace account. What I can do, though, is if you have not logged into it or if it has changed hands, what we can do is I can prompt Overdrive to send a new login invitation to you. So if you are totally unfamiliar with this, let me know, and I can tell you who owns that login, and if need be, we can change the person that gets directed to, and we can prompt Overdrive to send you a password change. Where you will find the numbers that you need from Overdrive are under Insights on the menu bar. Those ebook and audiobook numbers you'll find by looking down in the holding section, and make sure you put a check mark in that one that says Advantage Collection. And what you'll be looking for are the number of copies, ebook copies, audiobook copies. Most libraries don't have any video, but that would be there too. The other number from Overdrive that you need to run from within Overdrive Marketplace are the additions of your electronic content. And that is found under, again, the Insights tab. And if we go down and look at purchase and order reports, at the purchase titles summary, all right, the numbers that show here are derived from the values that you put in to run this report. So this report is already set to look at January through December 31st, 2020. If we needed to change that, I could change this to July 1st to June 30th. And then run that new report. The number that you will be looking for is this one number under Advantage Purchase Titles, Standard Copies Purchased. So in this, for this library, it's 425. So those are the two places that you need to look for numbers in Overdrive Marketplace. Let me go back to our LibGuide. 2.14, local electronic collections. These are the number of system-wide databases that are funded by RCLS and Newburgh, the Central Library, along with the consumer reports and Niche Academy. This number still includes the two Gale databases, Biography Resource Center and the literature. Those databases were dropped early last fall, but we're going to continue to count them for this annual report. They will not be counted next year in the annual report. All right, to that number 10 that we give you, you need to add whatever databases you license on your own. And one easy way to do that is to go to your database LibGuide A to Z list and just look for the ones that say that they were funded by your library. All right, and do not count the free databases. And the instructions from the state indicate which of the digital content databases you could include as an electronic collection. (2.19) other electronic materials. This is where we give you a huge number, which reflects the number of the government document records that we add into the answer database. (2.28) the electronic materials. These are additions to holdings. We give you one number, which reflects both the Overdrive editions and the those new government documents that we added. And to that, you're going to add in that number from the Overdrive Marketplace from the purchase titles report. Section 4, library transactions. Those are your circulation reports that are included in the packets that we give you. Once again, in some cases, you have to add in separate counts that we have on those report of adult and teen, but because the state wants those teen items counted as adult. All right, library transaction means a checkout. It does not mean items that you put in transit to other libraries.
Jerry,
Yes.
there is a question, I'm sorry, back on 2.14. Somebody wants to know, does canopy count for 2.14?
Yes.
And it is count as one. Okay.
Right, 4.12, the use of electronic materials. This is where it gets so complicated that we have to provide this table for you of the different online content services, because the state has a flow chart of how they want these counted. You see here that they can all count under 2.14 as one electronic collection. But then whether you count the circulations of materials or whether you count retrievals, you have to follow this flow chart. I think this should cover everything that any RCLS library has, but if it doesn't, let us know and we can try to expand this to include other services. Now, your packet includes the retrieval, the database usage reports from the system-wide databases. So to that, you need to add in any usage reports that you can get from any database that you license individually. Now, there are some databases that are structured such that there is no, you can't really define a retrieval. For instance, JobNow, Rosetta Stone measure things in terms of sessions and hours within sessions. And as of right now, there's no place on the annual report to indicate that type of use. Interlibrary loan activity, we give you the reports out of Symphony that indicate interlibrary loans within RCLS. In addition to that, you need to add in your seal, borrowing and lending totals, plus anything that you did otherwise, either directly with another library outside RCLS or with OC through OCLC. So that is everything under sections 2 and 4, collections and library transactions. There is one additional report that we provide in your packet that is used to answer the first question in section 3 under programs and services, where it's asking for the number of your resident and non-resident patrons. So that number can be found in these packets of the Symphony reports. Stephen, you want to take over on 3?
Okay. Does everybody see the LibGuide,
Yes.
Stephen?
section 3? Okay, so this is the fun section this year. Certainly COVID has affected this a lot, right? So your library visits have plummeted. They probably have gone down 75%, right? That's question 3.1, I believe. So here's a live example for Sloatsburg, right? This will not require a note because it won't create an edit check. Normally it would have. So just so you have an example of the type of things where we're not expecting to see a note to say COVID. So first of all, we haven't done a lot of in-person programming, right? So everything moved to digital. So DLD has indicated that live virtual programming and its viewers can be counted traditionally, right, in our program sections as programs in attendance, right? So this is a live program and also a program that was pre-recorded and released live, like streamed on Facebook or YouTube or another platform. That would still count as live programming, right? So that's going to replace your in-person. From January until we close down, you have your normal counts, and then you're going to move to virtual, right? And only if it's live. If you have recorded something and that program contents can be viewed, that is not a program because it's not live, but it can be counted. There's 11, I think, new COVID questions. They're all yes or no questions except for one. And the one question is how many recorded programs, right? So that's where you would count a recorded program. And if they're live, we're going to recount it. You're going to recount it in section 3 for statistics.
Stephen,
Yes.
it says here if the program was pre-recorded. Well, we have a ton of those. It said that's live. So I don't understand the difference between us pre-recording a session and then it can be viewed like 500 times.
So that will be a recording program that was accessed 500 times, and then that will be reported in the COVID question.
Okay.
So there is a possibility you can report it in both places. So if a pre-recorded that is released live, so what happens is you and your staff pre-recorded sections or whatever, incorporate that into a live program, right? So you've done some pre-work on the live program by recording and doing,
Right.
and then it was a scheduled time, because these are all the things that need to be a program.
It's not a scheduled time. Once we pre-record and put it out there, it's out there and that's it.
Then each access is recorded. But if this is a live, then you record that as a program and attendance. If it's not live and interactive and somebody just accessed a pre-recorded thing, then that gets answered in the COVID question. Right?
Okay, I think the thing that confused me was it says if the library program was pre-recorded and released live streamed.
Right.
That's, yeah, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Would have worked on that program before it, right? And then released it on Facebook Live or whatever. But
Right,
you can't do a live
we
program.
didn't do that. Right, right. I don't think we did that. Okay, thanks.
So, but that live program can be recorded, right?
Right,
So you get your program statistics and your attendance statistics, and then the recording is accessed several times, and then that becomes a statistics in that one COVID question.
in the COVID question. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So a
Thank you.
program can be counted in both.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I think that's probably more the exception.
Okay.
And Stephen, the COVID question asks for those 500 views or no?
So I'm going to jump right here to the COVID question.
Okay,
And did you record programs? And then total number of recordings of program content.
okay,
Report total number of recordings. All right, so it's not access, it's the number of recordings.
okay. Thank you.
Stephen, to kind of piggyback on all those. So Page Turner, for example, they released recorded material on Facebook. Is that considered a session, or do you want that in the COVID question?
Was it live? Was it interactive? Or did just somebody click on something and watch it? If somebody's just watching something, that's not a program, right? It's
Okay.
gotta be
So-
live. So there's some type of interactiveness to it, I guess.
Okay.
I have a
I
silly
had asked a
question.
question about notary, and I think that's come up last year too. And I don't remember what we said, because I don't think there's any specific place. It's not a reference question, right? And so I don't know, I don't see where we record.
Stephen, it's Maureen. You told us to count as one-on-one sessions.
That's what it was, okay.
So that counted for us for passports, notary, and just like we would a computer session.
Okay, yes. And the other thing that, I'm just gonna jump, since we're talking about one-on-one session, is remember we had discussions about passive programming? Probably didn't have much because there weren't many people in the building. I think like puzzles and things of that nature. And so DLD was saying, count passive programs as one-on-one because it doesn't meet the definition of a program, right? A program is a scheduled event at a targeted audience. Just a couple things that has to require. All right, programs. Where is it? Yes, so all of the, and they're gonna start breaking out the passive programs. So right here, going forward, DLD recommends that data for passive or self-directed programs be collected separately for reporting purposes beginning in 2021. So they're gonna break this out for next year.
Stephen,
Is-
Stephen, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Stephen, you can. Excellent. Okay. We have a couple questions. So reposting a live performance of a musical piece would not count as a program. That's a question.
So I don't think so, no. So library sponsored programs, you don't count anything that has 0. You don't count your staff or volunteers as attendance. You always count whoever the intended audience is. So if the intended audience is young adults, but you have half a dozen adults in there, you count everybody and it goes under the young adults because that was the intended audience. Hold on, I'm gonna try and read exactly. So it's saying under the programs, do not include recordings of program content in this section. Report recordings of program content in that new COVID question. So if you're doing, say there was a live recording of a band and you have a link on your website to that, I mean, how has the library sponsored that? How is that a library program that would be counted under your statistics? I don't think it would, unless it was a local band that you did a battle of the bands or something, right? But I think a link to somebody else's video is not a library program.
Stephen?
Yes.
I have another question from Grahamsville or from Daniel Pierce Library. They have a question for you. Go ahead.
So this is very specific, I apologize, but if we pre-recorded something, but also had a pickup where you were to take home the craft that went with the video that we did or something like that, do we count that as a recording or a program?
I'll count that as a program.
Not live.
No, but I mean, they're coming to, it would have been live, right?
Yes,
If they-
yes.
So, and they're coming to get programming materials for this. I think that meets the
Okay.
definition of a library program.
Okay, all right,
So I
thank
would
you.
count that there.
Thank you.
And so that answers perhaps the next question that's in there. Would take and make programs be counted as a passive program?
I think so, right? As a passive program.
It says it right on 3.22.
Yeah, 3.22.
Because it doesn't meet the definition of a library program. Right? No, a library program is a planned event with a date, time, and targeted audience. Right? So this is the key. And then they went in further because, you know, this goes on to your summer reading program. Right? So they gave further guidance about making sure what constitutes a children's program. And of course, story hours and summer reading. So what they're saying is, because they tie up these summer reading program statistics to the grants and stuff that is given out. So we want to make sure we're counting those to the best of our ability.
Okay, then here's another question. We had a band that recorded themselves, and we had patrons register and receive a Zoom link where patrons attended together to hear it. It was then viewable on our Facebook page for a couple of weeks. Is the first showing a program and the viewings after reported in the COVID section?
I would say yes, this would fall both, right? Because it meets the definition of a library program. It's a planned event, it has a date, a time, and the targeted audience was the community. But depending on the band, who the targeted audience. So yes, I think that would be counted the first time live viewed. It's one program with the number of people who attended, and hopefully Facebook analytics or something can give you those if you haven't tracked those. I believe also back in April or May, Grace had passed around a spreadsheet to count some of these things because we knew this was all coming, this and hours and things of that nature. I think there were maybe half a dozen libraries that were doing that. So that would help with all of these questions if you did that.
Hi, Stephen. I have a question.
Sure.
So last year we did some lunch sessions in the library, and this year it looked differently because the parents and participants were coming to pick up the lunches. And during those times, we also sometimes gave out the take-home crafts. So how can we count that? I guess it's kind of two questions, because if it was by itself, how would it be counted?
Well, how is it a program? I mean, when before you had lunch, people would come and then you would do programming stuff. And now
Yeah, so while they ate lunch, there was a craft or a story time during the time frame, during the scheduled time frame.
Yeah.
So this time it was still scheduled, but it was more of a pickup.
And then there was like a Zoom meeting. Was there some live interaction going on, or they just picked up
No.
and then it was self-directed after that? Right. So if the library didn't interact with this as a program, then it would seem to be more of that passive, the take and make. Right.
Okay, so we could count it as a passive program.
Right. And these passive programs is telling you, make sure you put notes in there to explain what the programs were.
Okay. And then I have one more question. So the print jobs would go in reference?
Print jobs?
Because this year we had a lot of, like, similar to the notary, we had a lot of requests for print jobs, whereas in the library, you were maybe going to the computer, assisting the patron. This time it was more drop off your materials, let us know what you want printed, how you want it, and then you do a pickup or something like that.
I don't know that print jobs is a program where it would be counted. Just printing stuff out for patrons?
Yeah, but sometimes it's more than that because you have to kind of help them maybe over the phone, even finding what they want, or they email you.
So I
Things
don't
like
think just helping somebody print is counted anywhere. But if there's reference questions in there that are being answered, then I think you would answer those under the reference transaction.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was thinking. Thank you.
Mhm.
Even could it be a one-on-one session since they're dealing just with one patron at a time?
Yes, but I would be, I mean, depending on these print jobs, if, you know, you're a print shop, I'm not sure that, I don't,
No, I'm thinking like something that lasts, let's say, more than 5 minutes, you know, where it's more involved, not just a simple, I need this printed out, I'll be there in 5 minutes.
yes, because you're doing one-on-one. And that's the same thing, like, I think under tutoring help, they had the instructions talked about that as well.
Right.
But
Computer
isn't every
sessions-
reference question a one-on-one?
I'm thinking of the more detailed stuff, you know, like if I can help someone with the computer saying, here's how to print and then walk away. But if I have to sit there with them and show them how to use Word and it takes, like I said, like more than 5 minutes, then I would count it as a one-on-one because
No,
it's
it's just a reference question. That happens all the time.
So right here in the instructions, and this is question 3.9. So let me tell you how I would do this. I would go to the question. And by the way, this is a little slow, this program. If I go back, one of the ways you know it's processing is down here. There's a gray button. So if I go to next, you see that little gray button. So 29. So click on this. You probably can't see this pop up, can you? Can you see it?
No.
No?
No.
Oh. So right here. So a scheduled computer assistant with an individual. So whether scheduled with one person or set up as a walk-in time, then you can count them as one-on-one. So it's got to be scheduled. So if somebody just comes up and asks for help for printing, that wouldn't be counted. That wouldn't be counted there. Let me go back.
So for us, the patrons call ahead of time, and then they do the drop off, and then we kind of call them back to let them know when their materials are ready, and they come and do the pickup.
Yeah. So if it's scheduled, right? I think that's just one of the keys for these.
Okay.
And same
Okay.
thing. So if you had like a schedule an hour for computer help and 5 people showed up, you can count all those 5 people as one-on-ones. But this is one of the
Stephen?
best things is if you're in the program, if you're able to just click on them and that brings up the instructions for that. And that's actually a
Stephen?
lot of what I do. Yes.
Stephen? Okay. This goes back a little bit like the band question. SUPLA sponsors the Sullivan County Poet Laureate. The Poet Laureate had Facebook Live readings every weekday this year. Is that counted by our libraries in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lie, but the question is who gets the counts? Right? I don't, do you divide them? I mean, if every library counts in Sullivan, then you're tripling the counts, quadrupling the counts. It seemed like, yes, you would want those. But there's got to be a way to allocate them. Right? So we're not duplicating. Does that make sense?
I think you can duplicate them if everybody's watching them.
Yeah,
Everybody's using them.
I would say that you know, each library gets to count that.
for the attendees.
Yes,
as
for
well.
your attendees that are at your place.
Well, who hosted it? I mean, there's got to be one host. Supla. So it is in the library.
Well, Supla sponsored it. The poet laureate page is separate. I mean, I'm an administrator, and the poet laureate is an administrator.
I would say then, yeah, let's go with each library reporting it. And if it's
Does that count as a collaboration?
yes, but it, who you're collaborating with, right?
Right. Okay.
So I think down here it's collaborators or something. So yes. So just, yeah, I mean, obviously we want to show those statistics. So just add notes that you are counting the entire
So
participant.
we would, each library would count the number of sessions she presented and the number of viewers.
Yeah, they were live. Yeah, that's what we're saying, right? But I think we need to add a note because this might come up, the DLD. So if you add a note, then it won't get lost.
Okay,
Thank you.
Stephen, going back now a little bit to the printing and things, we make appointments for copies, faxing, computer, ... Does that count as one-on-one?
If you're doing this because of the pandemic, I'm going to say no, right? You're doing this because your building's not opening and you're just opening your building to let someone come in and use a service that you normally would not have counted anyways. So I don't think that because of making appointments that we should count this, right? That's a good question. This is going to be the tough one. So I think in section 3. And this section is specifically where we're saying, you know, don't overuse this thing. Okay, any more questions about programs or services? I'm sure they'll come up. Feel free to email. Email is the best way to ask questions to Martha and I, because then we can get them in order and copy and paste and do our research. All right, we're going to move on to section 5 and 6, technology. So not much has changed here. I'll give you all these answers. Annual visits to the library website. DLD has explained that they would really like the number of, not the number of pings, but actually the number of people who access the information on the website. And I think this would specifically affect Thrall Library. Let's see, what else? E-rates, it's all gonna be the same answers as last year. There's really not much that has changed in section 5. In section 6, not much has changed. In fact, nothing has changed. Section 6 and 5. So we're gonna jump to number 7 and 8. These are the minimum standards. So there's 2 minimum standards again this year. The minimum standards as of December 31st and as of 2021, December 31st or January 1st, 2021. Now this, they pre-filled all of the questions with last year's. So make sure you just double check those, that they're the same. Question 7.7, is the library open for the minimum standard number of hours? Probably not, right? So this is the one area that you're gonna put no to, and then you will say due to COVID, right? And this would normally trigger a variance, but there will be no variances this year for not being open, minimum number of hours, obviously. Now, when we get to section 8, public service information, this is gonna come up. Minimum weekly hours total, right? COVID is considered an other event. And so this answer is probably gonna be exactly the same it was last year and the year before. So this is a question that I've been getting a lot on. people would think we have to reduce it. No, this is typically what is your minimum weekly hours that you're open, right? And then 7.7 is, all right, what did you meet that standard? Does that make sense?
Stephen, I have a technical question. There are times when it says how many sessions, 1 or 0, and there's a little box, a little square box. If the answer is 0, do you just not put a check mark in that little box? Yeah, there you go, like that.
Yes, that's right. You don't check it. You didn't
Okay.
collaborate.
Thank you.
COVID questions.
I have a question for you, Stephen.
Sure.
We never closed our book drop, and it was attended to 5 days a week by myself and one other person. Do we count that as open hours?
This was 27. I don't think so. They identified this stuff, and actually it's in the COVID questions, I think. So this is where, so you're gonna follow the reasoning with the COVID questions here, right? So the first one is, for any of the library's outlets physically closed to the public for any period of time. So now a building can be physically closed, but you can still offer Wi-Fi and curbside services outside the building or even in your vestibule, right? That's still considered closed. And now, did you offer public service during COVID? Did the library provide service during any portions that the building was physically closed? And they're saying services, answering calls, emails, texts. So I'm thinking the answer for everybody on this one is yes, that building was closed. We were all under a state order. Yes, you all provided services while we were closed, you know, of these things, curbside, things like that. Next question, electronic materials, was it added to COVID? So this question, you know, I'm only thinking about ebooks. Jerry, you correct me if I'm wrong, if there would be other electronic materials, but in ebooks, the answer for system-wide would be no. In fact, we spent less on ebooks than we did last year. There was the thought of increasing it, the e-content pool, but that was reduced. And also, or wasn't reduced, it didn't pass. And CLDA funds, we cut probably $20,000 in e-contents, which is unfortunate because that's what's increasing 44%. So just from an ebook standpoint, you would only answer yes if your specific library spent more money on ebooks. But are there any other electronic resources that I'm not thinking of, Jerry? I'm thinking of a database. Didn't somebody offer free services?
The libraries all got free access for a couple of months to newspaperarchive.com, but it was offered as free, so they weren't paying for it.
So I think actually maybe we can say yes.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm reading the question, did they increase access to electronic collection materials? And that's also true of the libraries that license Ancestry, because they were given for almost the entire year remote access, increased access to their Ancestry database that they did not have before.
All right, so.
Even Jerry, we also looked at Hoopla and increased how many borrows were allowed.
Yeah, I think if you added like Hoopla or Canopy specifically because of COVID, then you could answer that as yes.
Thank you.
I have a question about Ancestry. I come from another library system. I did the report in another library system. Where do I get the Ancestry numbers? Do you provide those or do we have to get them ourselves?
You would have to get them yourselves because from ProQuest.
Thank you.
Jerry, you said we could
claim Hoopla. We've had Hoopla for a while, but we doubled the amount of checkouts. So.
Well, that's going to be, you didn't increase the access.
Well, we did. We increased access from 5 to 10 a month.
Yeah, that's what Hoopla allowed. I think that's the difference. We were given more access.
Well, again, if they were giving you, increase the level of access that you had without costing anything, I think you would still be able to answer that question as yes.
Well, it does call, we pay per checkout on it, but we allowed patrons to go from a limit of 5 a month to 10.
Right, so that's increasing borrowing limits.
Yeah, that's increasing the limits, yeah.
Okay.
So my focus was too narrow. I think when you expand it beyond just ebooks, that many of you, most of us can say yes, because of the historical. So I'm gonna update that later.
Stephen, can you go back to the hours for a second? So my understanding of what you just said is 7.7 would be no with a note. 8.6 would be the same as last year. And that means 8.10 would also be the same as last year, or do you want us to reduce it based on the number of weeks we were closed using the definition of closed from the state?
Say that last bit again.
Sure. So I guess if 7.7 is no, 8.6 is no different than last year, even though we really were reduced. 8.10, how do you want that answer put in there? Real numbers, actual numbers?
That's a total line.
Correct.
0.10. So you couldn't, it's going to total from the lines before it.
It's not.
8.10. Oh, the total is annual library hours. So again, in the instructions says extensive hours closed due to the public due to natural disasters or other events. So when it says that, we ignore COVID, and you will put in the hours that you would normally be open.
Okay, so no change from last year.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Excuse me, Stephen, it's Angela. I question about that 7.7 then. So the minimum hours, is that across an annual basis? Or is that, I mean, we had to close from mid-March to, we didn't really resume public service until third week of June. But when we did, we resumed and certainly met the minimum standard hours of service.
Right, but this is on an annual basis, so.
So because we missed those 3 months, that answer is okay.
Yeah, and I've got the pop-up here when I click on the question at the bottom. If the library was not open, the required minimum number of hours, answer no, and add to the notes field due to COVID, and no variance is required. Right. So it's not asking anywhere for the actual hours that you were open. It's only asking what you should have been open and were you open when you should as a yes or no. Right. So you're not reporting the actual hours that you were open anywhere.
So Stephen, can I just make sure that Kelly's question was answered? Mm-hmm. So should 8.10 be the total hours we were actually open, or will that be the same as last year as well? I'm just making sure her question was answered.
Same as last year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Charlotte's question, if they added Hoopla, I think that was answered also back when Jerry was speaking. Just want to make sure about that.
All right, back to COVID. So, and these questions took me a few minutes to reading this. So the question is, did you issue library cards before COVID and during COVID? And the answer is yes, because overdrives get a library card program was was active before and during COVID. So that alone would trigger a yes for these things. And then again, you'll have to answer, did you provide reference services? And if you did, make sure that, you know, you have transactions in there. Question 4.18. And then again, I think you can go through these things. They're pretty self-explanatory. We went over the live programs. It's a yes or no. Recorded programs, yes or no. And then how many recorded programs. External Wi-Fi before and after, did you provide it? Yes and no. And did you increase your external Wi-Fi to your parking lot? And then here's an interesting question. The last one is staff reassigned during COVID. So in other words, did the library pay staff to do business of another governmental unit or yeah, agency or not-for-profit, like distribute school lunches and things of that nature? For RCLS, it would be, we did a lot on the census, right? So this would be what one of the big things that I would hear. And of course, if you're going to say yes, it would be really great if you could provide a note and tell us what it is they did. Now, this isn't your staff volunteering, right? This is your staff is on staff time doing not library work, but work for another agency.
There's Laura had a question about circulating hotspots counting as providing Wi-Fi outside the building. If that is something you started during COVID, then yes, I believe you could answer that in 12. Or if you added more hotspots in 13.
Yeah, I mean, these are hotspots you've added to the building, right? You're not loaning them out. You're just putting them there to expand service.
Now they're actually circulating them to patrons.
No, I don't see how that would be here.
Well, I mean, the library is paying for the connection that comes with those hotspots.
I don't think that's the intent of this question. I mean, if you look at the notes, they're talking about parking lot, bookmobiles. We're talking about providing access.
Well, I mean, some libraries increase the number of the hotspots that they're circulating to patrons so that the more patrons could get on the internet.
Yeah. So let's go with that.
I think that counts. So
what I would suggest, though, then this is just put a note.
Yes.
Right, that would be great. And then if DLD doesn't like it, they'll let us know. But I'm all for adding it and adding the note when we don't know or we're not sure.
And Stephen, here's another question about Wi-Fi access. Our library added an access point for better Wi-Fi access outside the library. Where would we put that?
External Wi-Fi access added during COVID-19 would be a yes. You would just answer yes to that question, right? Now, in the outlet, it asks about number of Wi-Fi usage. So we'll get to the usage. This is just asking about the service. And everything on these COVID questions, the date frame here is from March 7th to December 31st. So you want to consider that date frame, time frame when you're answering those questions. Okay. Outlet information. This is another area where they have pre-filled a lot of this information for you. And these are recommendations that we've been making to the state. You know, your square footage really doesn't change that often. So things like that. So they've done all of this. There's right here, it's probably Wi-Fi access. That's where, you know, you're going to count those statistics. And it'll be interesting to see about the Wi-Fi access. right? Because how many people are sitting in your parking lots? I don't think there's anything else in section 9 that is. And all this stuff, a lot of it pre-fills. And again, I mean, with notes, we love notes. Here's a great use of flags, right? Looks like these were questions that they didn't know, so they flagged them so they can come back to them later. Just curious. Okay. All right, let's move on. So that's the outlet. Next, trustees.
Stephen, I'm sorry, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
So under 915, it is talking about actual hours opened. So that is going to be different than 8.10.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that correct?
Somewhere. No, it's not. Extensive hours closed to the public due to the natural disasters or other events should be excluded from the count. So no.
Okay, so 8:10 and 9:15 are the same.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Sarah,
This
Sarah, it actually says that in 8.10 in the notes. It says it equals 9.15.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Stephen, don't move on from the Wi-Fi access yet. Hang on.
Okay.
We did not add access to Wi-Fi outside because people could always access it outside the library. But we did add signs on all the doors with our password and network information. Is that increasing access?
The COVID questions. Let's go. And it's talking about.
I would say yes, but put that in a note.
Right. Should the library provide access to users outside the building before, during? Yeah, there's no notes, explanations. So again, I would say, just as Jerry says, yes, and let's add a note to explain. Okay. So, officers and trustees. Fortunately, nothing has changed. So it's, I have to give big kudos again to Martha over the last few years. She's been very good about helping keeping the trustee terms consistent year over year and year. So this is coming up with some libraries. So this section here, again, all your answers you can see, I would expect that most of these are going to be the same, except for maybe the number of board meetings. A little bit about the software, because this is a funky section. The board president is always a fixed and not a repeating group. So this is why you see the previous year's answers. The next trustee, you always have to add, and so you will never see the previous year's answers. This is where you have to have last year's report printed and in your face, right? Because your terms should not change from year to year to year, right? And that's one of the big things that we're looking at. And also with your, unfortunately, with the trustees, is if they don't serve a full term, is there has to be a note to explain it, right? And chances are it's going to be the same note for 2 or 3 years until the trustee then gets reelected to a full term. So that's why looking at last year's report is really, really critical in this section. So you add all of your trustees, and it's helpful for you and everybody else if you add them in the same order as last year, right? Because
Stephen?
when we review the reports, we do a PDF that has last year's and this year. And so if you have your trustees in the same order, it's very easy to see. Otherwise, they get all different. So, Martha?
Stephen, one question in relation to the February 1st thing. I'm acquiring a new trustee on February 8th. Can I include her?
No, it's clear. February 1st is the cutoff.
Okay,
Right?
great.
So
And
that's the cutoff.
okay, and
so if that person, if you wanted, you could possibly put a note if it's a vacant position or the old person, and then if you wanted, you could add a note as of February 8th, it was replaced. But the person didn't have that position, so.
and what if a trustee passed away and has not yet been replaced?
Then that would be a vacant position.
A vacant, right. And then about the order, sometimes they can't come up in the same order because you can't see the previous year. At least I can't.
Right, you're never going to be able to see it because there's these repeating groups. It never shows you last year's information, which is why, especially for the board section, you want to print that. You want to print it off of here, as long as there weren't, or you can use your copy, as long as there weren't any changes, right? So the board president is always there. Then you have to add a repeating group, and it'll only add the board president and one person, and then it'll create a next page. It's a little odd. You have to create these groups, and then you can add 5 more trustees per page.
Stephen,
Yes.
all my trustees were in. I didn't have to add a group. They were all there.
Really? Is anybody
Yes.
else? Was that true for you, Anne Marie? I'm looking at
Yes,
you.
Pine Bush too. Pine Bush was all there.
Really?
It was wonderful, wonderful.
Wow. You know, I do a proof the report for Division of Library Development, and it didn't happen on the report I proofed. So that's interesting. In that case, good for you. Double check the numbers, or double check the information and make sure there's a note. You might see last year's note. That's another reason. If you put them in the same order, last year's note will end up being correct for this one as well. But if you don't do in the same orders, then last year's notes won't match up either. So it's bizarre. Okay. So, and of course you have to have the same number of records as you have trustees. And if, you know, a trustee seat is vacant, this is why we've been keeping track of this in here, so you always know the terms.
Stephen,
Yes.
Somebody mentions that they send in a spreadsheet and that it works better.
So yes, that is an option. You can upload a spreadsheet to Connect, and then they will populate these fields for you. If you have a few trustees, I don't think it's worth it. If you have a lot of trustees, it may be. So who did that? Somebody did that and it worked well, Jill?
Livingston Manor.
And Stacy? Well, yeah, you have 13 trustees, so you're the ones that I would.
It takes a day or two. But
No,
like,
I did it at my last library. I've been in 3 library systems, so I've done it at my 2 last library systems. And it works much better because you can take that Excel spreadsheet, send it to your board members ahead of time in case there's any questions, to double check their email and the contacts. And then you have it before you start the process.
Okay, well, that's great.
when I did it 2 years ago, the site was glitchy for some reason and wasn't taking it every time I added a group. So I tried the spreadsheet, and I've been doing that way since.
Yep.
All right,
Works better.
I'm glad to hear. The next part of this trustee is a trustee education, right? So this is a second year for this, I think. And so they made a update on the instruction, and this is for your trustees as of December 31st, not as of February 1st, right? So you may not have the same trustees here that are on the other list. So that's the big change here that I want you to be aware of. And again, we would love notes on what they did. And here's an example. Everybody did sexual harassment training, right? So if you wanted to, you could literally copy that and paste. So that's the new news there, is just do this as of December 31st. Any more questions about trustees?
Stephen, I have a question, Minerva.
Sure.
What if you don't know whether or not your trustees have taken these educational things because they didn't pass on any information? Do you guys
Then
have
you
records?
reach out and email them. It's a requirement.
Okay.
Right? I mean, sexual harassment, they don't have a choice.
Right, those I do have, but the trustee 101, I may not, unless they've volunteered the information.
Right. Yep. So you can poll them.
Okay.
Financials. So the financials are on a cash basis, right? So there's no accruals, there's no defers, there's no receivables, there's no payables, none of that language should show up here at all. You know, if you didn't deposit, if your fiscal year ended December 31st and you didn't deposit the checks on December and you did it in January, then it doesn't count on this report. So local public funds, you just want to make a note here that the Orange County Libraries Association, you do have a contract, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Peggy, with the county, and the funding was much less in 2020. I think what happened, oh, it was Jenny, I think who does this, right? It was supposed to be 115,000, but you guys only got 50% of the funds, and it was distributed, and I think everybody got $3,382 in May. So that will get reported in this section. And SUPLA, I know that you do not have a contract. I'm not sure about LARC. I don't think they have a contract. And also under this stuff, there was no member items that I'm aware of this year, right? So there's some lost revenue. So this is system cash grants to member libraries. This is that handout I give you every year, and it's at the bottom. So if you click on this link, it'll bring up a PDF, and that is the LLSA money, any member items, any grants that would have come through RCLS, which is significantly less. I think just the member items was about $275,000 less than what it was the year before. And that was all money directly to libraries. So that's where that is. And so here, so under other federal aid, so if your library received the employee retention credit, or you got a paycheck protection program, or anybody has utilized the Family First response and they got the paid sick leave for quarantining, right? And that would have happened through your payroll provider as a credit. So if you had any of these three programs, we're going to want you to post this here because it's federal money. Now the PPP program is really a loan, but it's not, right? We're expecting most of your funds to be forgiven. And so it's more of a grant than it is a loan. But you might have to pay something back. When you do pay back the PPP portion, which will be this year probably, you would post that payment under line 12.30 under a budgeted loan. So that's just thinking ahead for next year. And then here I give you a little list of all of the checks, most common checks that you would write to RCLS and where you would report those payments. And I think we're also doing this on all of our invoices. So each invoice tells you which line it goes on as well. So you can keep track throughout the year. Another big thing, specifically for these three questions, The notes always say, if you have one single expense of 10,000 or more, identify them. So in these three, if it's 10,000 or more, and you haven't given me a note, I'm going to be asking you. So that's probably some of the biggest questions I get, or I ask for every year is for notes on these three. 2.26, this is contracts with public libraries and library systems. This, I should probably expand that. I'm going to do that. That is specifically your answer fees. That's the contract. You signed a contract with RCLS, and so that's contract with public libraries. And within your answer fees, included in there is the telecommunications fees for the fiber. So there needs to be a specific note that says how much that telecommunication costs are. And that we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. And that was specifically, DLD asked us to put that information, the telecommunications, in contract with libraries and not in telecommunications. And then, of course, the hard part is it's got to balance because it's a cash report. So if you have a hard time balancing, you can always give me a call, and I'm usually pretty good at walking people or trustees or through it. Your board has to do a motion to approve this. Here's what your motion could look like. It really is just a regurgitation of the question. And then the capital fund, I'm not going to say much about that. It's just money's coming in and out. If you have a capital fund and you got construction grant money from the state, you must receive it into the capital fund section. It does not get received into the operating fund. If you don't have a capital fund, then you can receive it in there, right? But if you have a capital fund, it has to be received into this section and spent out of this section. Let me go now to the software. So as you get done, one of the things you want to do is you want to hit the show status. I'm going to do this a couple different ways. And see, here's that box. That's how you know. And so now these are all your edit checks. So this is asking questions. In addition to other material holdings, do not cover increase in all other material holdings. Please check the value of possible errors. I'm not sure, you have to go back and look through that. So, but this will give you all your unanswered questions. And some of these, right, like the director of Sloatsburg got her MLS, so she's no longer a manager. She's a director. So, you know, maybe this is where we will want to copy that note again for her. So if it's red, you cannot submit your report. You can't submit a report that has edits that are unresolved. If it's green, that means it's an edit, but you've answered the question. Make sure you're answering the question that's being asked. Sometimes somebody will add a note and it makes absolutely no sense to what's being asked. So just read the question.
Stephen?
Yes.
Have a question. I was told that if the construction documents do not specifically say that the funds must go towards capital projects, we don't have to deposit them into the capital line. Can you comment?
How you receive the funds, whether you put it into your operating, your capital, has no impact from the state. They're not going to tell you where to put it, right? But they are restricted funds for a specific purpose. If you're using the capital section, the other reason to use the capital section is part of the RCLS service fee is based on your total operating cost, less any debt service, right? We changed that last year. We're backing out the debt service. So if you're including your construction in your operating, then you'll be paying a wee bit more in the RCLS service fee. It's not a whole lot. I did the math. I think like if you do $100,000 in construction, it'll add $750 or something like that. So sometimes it may not be worth it for the accounting to do all of that, but nobody's telling you where you have to deposit the money or not. And if you want to follow up with me later, I can help you, because sometimes it's easy. We can just move it over to the capital and receive it in the capital and then spend it out of the capital. So there's nothing left. So if you need help with that, you can give me a call. Next thing, so we have these edit checks, right? So this is what it defaults to. Next thing you do, you can say unanswered questions, right? And this is where you're going to want to put NAs or zeros. And then the last one is flag questions. And this is all the questions that you have flagged. And that's one of the things that we lost when they upgraded the software. There used to be an arrow right here that we could click, and it would bring us right back to the report to that question. Because sometimes you need to see the questions before or after to find out what you need to fix. Unfortunately, every year I ask for that back. So now if you wanted to do this, you really just have to go back to My Survey and then go back and click. So it's more cumbersome. The last thing I'd like to show you is printing, right? So for example, if you're given the financial section to your bookkeeper and your bookkeeper doesn't see this report, this is what I would suggest. So I would suggest you would go and you would do your operating funds, your receipts, your capital stuff with current year's data. It's going to do a PDF, and I'll reshare my screen so you can see that. All right. So this is great. So I think the financial section, right? So if you give this to your bookkeeper who doesn't have access to the report, they know what was reported last year, right? Here's last year. And then in NIAC, what I did was I had a pencil and I wrote in the answers, and then Minerva keyed them in. So for the first 4 years I worked at NIAC, I never even saw the annual report. I just got a copy of this. So this is a great way to do that with the children's section and things like that. Because, you know, you always start with what was last year, and does this make sense, right? So this is a great way to organize that work. Okay. Where to now? Back to here. So you can see you can do that for sections. The other thing that's going to happen is this. So this is where I suggest you do the whole report before you start it. And it's just very, this is how we actually review your report too. We will print the whole PDF and review it like we did, just side by side, because we can review this probably twice as fast than actually trying to scroll and page through the reports. And again, we're not the auditors. I'm not auditing your reports to, you know, the pennies. I'm looking at the, you know, this sheet, which is the cash. I'm looking at your beginning and ending cash, which is always interesting. I'm looking at the e-content pool, right? Because everybody should be, and I'm not saying, I'm looking at what the e-content for the year was for your library, and that question 12.7 has to be this number or higher, right? Because what you paid into the pool. So I'm not detailing every number. I'm just looking at the total RCLS service fee, right? That has to go under consultants. And so I'm just looking to make sure that line 12.22 equals the RCLS service fee or more.
Stephen, we have a question in reference to the bookkeeper.
Yep.
Do you recommend not giving access to the report to the bookkeeper?
I think that all depends on your comfort level with the bookkeeper. So I would have no problems with bookkeepers, and I know that outside CPA firms also have access, and you know, I work with them as well. So yeah, if you're comfortable with your bookkeeper, then that's fine. Just make sure there aren't multiple people in the report at the same time. Let me just take a quick peek. Finishing up is really just what I was talking about, the statuses. And then Martha had so much time on her hand, she even threw in a page for last year's report. So if you want to see what RCLS's annual report is, here it is. This is our report. And then this is the RCLS statistics as a PDF, as an Excel. And this is the 2019 annual report of every library, of every question, right? So this is what I go to put together all my schedules. So you have access to all of this information as well. And then that was last year's health plans. So that's it. The annual reports. Questions? I would say about half a dozen of you are well over half done. I looked at it. Stop sharing. Okay. So I think that's it, right? Unless you have anything, Jerry or Martha?
No, but if anyone has any ideas for how we could improve that LibGuide or add more things to it, let us know.
Yes, and I like to give a shout out to Sarah and to Anne Marie from Sloatsburg. So they gave us a lot of great feedback that we updated the LibGuide with already. So thank you.
When DLD puts their outline of changes, sometimes it doesn't include everything, which always throws us for a loop.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so if you have questions.
My only suggestion would be when you do make updates to the LibGuide, let people know. So if they have already printed it out, they'll kind of have a heads up.
And Stephen, we have a question. I mean, I think I know the answer, but if we have questions later, who should we contact?
So parts 2, 4, and the trustee section, but parts 2 and 4 go to Martha or Jerry, right? That's holdings and circulations. And then trustee questions, Martha, and then everything else will go to me. And we prefer email, just so we can organize it better.
Once I make changes, then they're carved in stone, and if we have a snow day, the library has to pay those people that are filming it for.
And of course, you can call. So I think that's it. So thank you as we muddled our way through the Zoom and bouncing back and forth between online. Mary Lou, question?
The coverage, make sure that you guys don't go over.
Just a thank you.
Don't go over their limit.
Thank you.
If a part-timer has to go over the limit, that's different.
Stephen, do we expect the COVID questions will be on the annual report next year too?
I don't know. Normally it takes, hold on, DLD, I think 2 to 3 years to get a new question on the annual report. And actually it's not DLD, it's the Institute of Museum and Library Service. These questions were done in 3 or 4 months, I think. So that was a Herculean effort to get 11 questions on the annual report. I don't know. I expect if not these questions, some other variation as the pandemic changes.
If nobody's on it, using it, it's still linked.
So we're willing to, Martha, Jerry, and I, keep the Zoom meeting going and talk about hiking, annual reports, tax levy, whatever you want.
if you're on the phone.
We good?
All right, so I think we're good, unless you want to stay. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Not unless you got lunch, Stephen.
Yeah, I know. Somebody asked me
Thanks,
that
Stephen.
already. I'm handing
Thank
out
you.
McDonald's coupons.
Or one of those wraps, those good wraps.
Stephen, the recording of
Yes.
this, when will that be available? How will that be available?
So I think first we should probably stop recording. Right, it's over, and then I guess I can post that on the LibGuide, and we'll see if we can do that by the end of the day.